Over the past few years, I've knit a lot of vintage and antique sweaters that are very appropriate for the fall and winter time, and I love them so much. But we are now moving to the West Coast. We'll be seeing a little bit more milder temperatures and getting a few more knits in my wardrobe that are more hot weather appropriate would be really, really nice. This video has been kind of a long time coming, and a lot of chaos happened while this was going on, but I am excited to finally share it with you all and have two beautiful, more summer appropriate sweaters available in my closet, even though it is now moving towards the fall and winter time. I will hopefully still be able to get a lot of use out of them this year. I found two that I really liked. This first one is kind of one of those fake layered tops, so it kind of looks like you're wearing a knit vest over a lacy blouse underneath. And the yarn that I'm deciding to use for this one is a bamboo sock yarn, so hopefully a little bit more summer weather appropriate, or at least warmer weather appropriate, because bamboo feels so wonderful next to your skin on hot days. And the second one reminds me very, very much of my favorite vintage sweater I've knit so far, which is that green and white leaf sweater, except it has daisies, or I think they're daisies. Anyway, cute, super cute flowers on it. For this one, I'm going to try using a linen yarn. I haven't knit anything out of a linen yarn before, and it definitely doesn't have the same kind of stretch and bounce back that wool has, which I normally work with. So I'm super interested to see how this vintage pattern is going to turn out. You'll also be joining me on a cross-country move during the process of me knitting these sweaters as well. So I hope that you enjoy kind of seeing how these sweaters come together, how I knit them, and how we also ended up here in California. Why don't we go ahead and get to working on the first sweater. As is common with most vintage patterns, this particular jumper is worked in pieces from the bottom up, and I started with the front piece, which kind of gives that faux vintage vest look. I believe that I have knit the rest of the front of this sweater up until I have to do the shaping for the arm size. So the pattern originally called for the length from here to the bottom to be a total of 10 3/4 inches, but I lengthened it to 12.5 inches. So not quite 2 inches longer than the pattern calls for. I'm a long torsoed lady, and I prefer to have something be a little bit too long than a bit too short, because I will be forever pulling it down, which is so annoying to me. What I'm doing now is the first and last 6 stitches of this piece are going to be a moss stitch border, so it'll kind of mock as if it were the edge of a vest that I'm wearing that lacy blouse underneath. And I'm going to be doing some shaping for the arm size, and then I'm going to be doing some work for the front border of the vest part of this top as well. So that was a lot of, how do I say it? A lot of people can find stockinette knitting, which is just knitting one row, purling one row, knitting one row, purling one row, to be a little boring. And it was very repetitive, and it's very fine yarn, so there was a lot of knitting involved. But for me right now, just having something like mindless but works my hands and my fingers is really, really nice to kind of help with the stress of a move. It's time to shape the arm size and make a lovely pattern border at the edge. Super happy with the progress on the front of this sweater so far. So I have finished one of the, what would you call it, like front bits of the vest, like to the shoulder. So if I'm holding this up on myself, can you kind of see that? I've created one shoulder, and now what we have to do is we have to cast off at this front faux neckline, and I have to do the exact same shoulder bit for the front right bit. I have to say, working on these knitting projects is a very nice distraction from the chaos of the move. How many times have I mentioned that moving is stressful? I'm sure everyone knows. It's a lot, but we're getting there, and I have these lovely pieces to work on to distract me along the way. did not take too long at all. It was just about an hour later, some knitting, some packing, and the whole front piece is finished. Now, I don't know if you can see, but there's a stain on the front bit of this here. Unfortunately, that's where I got the yarn wrapped around the wheels of my office chair, and I think the grease kind of got on the yarn a little bit there. So I'm gonna have to clean that up, but this is what the top looks like so far. The next step is to make the matching back piece. Is that as magical as I hoped it would be? Slight confession time, I already knit the back piece before I started on the front piece, so I have the front and the back ready to go and to be sewn up. But before I sew it up, I am going to knit on the lace portions of this. For the lace, I grabbed myself some of this alpaca yarn. It is on a cone because it's meant for weaving, and I do have a weaving project planned for this a little bit later, but I thought that it was the perfect size and softness, and it had this wonderful halo to it. I don't know if you can see, it's gorgeous. And there are a few pieces that I have to make out of this lace pattern. So definitely the two sleeves, the front panel-ish for the blouse, so two of those, and then the collar that goes around it. So I think there's 5 separate lace pieces that I have to knit. And maybe while I knit the lace pieces, I'll let my stained front bit soak so I can get the stain out of that before I sew everything together. All right, all of my pieces are knit for this sweater. The front mark, I think I've gotten the stain out, so we're looking a lot better there. I'm very happy. In these vintage patterns, now that all the pieces are knit, it doesn't mean that your sweater's finished. I feel like in modern patterns, especially the sweaters that are knit in the round, you still have some finishing to do, like weaving in your ends and maybe blocking it a little bit, but with vintage patterns, you still have to do all of that and sew everything together. I'm looking at the instructions in front of me right here, and the first thing that we have to do is, hold on, let me find the different pieces. These are the vest fronts. We have to work a row of double crochet along the right edge and then make 2 button loops so that this can kind of button together in the front. Hope I haven't packed all of my crochet hooks. I'll have to see if I can find a crochet hook somewhere. And then it says that we lap the edges together and then we sew it down to the front piece behind. So it kind of looks like it's the vest that you wear behind. So I'm gonna go ahead and work on the crochet bit and sewing that into place on the front bit of the blue part of this sweater. Now that I've sewn all the pieces of this sweater together, it's time for me to choose a button for the false front lace vest. I have a few really cute buttons to choose from. One of my favorites was this bow. However, I just thought it would get caught in the lace of the knitting too much. So instead I went with this other really sweet button that looks a little bit like a white flower. I absolutely love it, and I think that it complements kind of the vibe of this sweater really well. And the first of my summer vintage sweaters is completely finished. I absolutely love the buttons that I was able to find to go on this piece. I am not going to try this on just yet because I have a second sweater that I would like to knit. So I'm going to go and get started on that one. We are at T-3 days until we start driving across the country, so I don't think I'm going to get it done beforehand. So you might be seeing a little bit of this video from the moving truck as I finish up the second summer sweater. Super happy with this one, and I will show it like on me and the final version of this finished sweater after I finish the second one as well. So let's go straight to knitting my really cute daisy sweater for the second one. I have started working on the Marguerite sweater, and I'm probably going to forget that name, so I'm probably just going to be calling it the Daisy sweater. And I am so happy with the color that I chose for it, this kind of like sea green. I really like the feel of this linen, and I think it's going to be a great fabric for the summer, but I do wish that I could find a linen yarn of this weight that has a little bit of like nylon in it or something a little stretchy, kind of like I had in the bamboo yarn for my first sweater that I shared with you all. Linen and cotton, they don't really have that natural bounce back that wool does, and the nylon just kind of helps it stay into shape and not grow too dramatically over time. It doesn't have the same memory. I think I'm now finished. I measured it. I need 3.5 inches on the bottom band, and now I'm going to be knit my way outwards. I do think I'm going to give myself extra length in this one as well. I just, once again, like my tops a little bit longer because I have a long torso. Update on life. It is chaos. I don't know if it looks much different from your view. We're picking up the moving truck tomorrow. We start driving the day after. I am not done packing. I am still working, so I have a full day of work ahead of me right now. And all I want to do is knit on this sweater. So we will probably be finishing off this sweater as we drive across the US. So some fun road trip content in there, hopefully, for you all as well. I'll update you again soon, hopefully. I've made pretty good progress on just about everything for packing, especially in my office. It's actually kind of fun to go through all of my crafting stuff. But I am just really dragging my feet on doing my closet. So I thought I would motivate myself a little bit by sharing this progress with you. I haven't touched it at all, so yeah. Watch me pack up all of my clothes. We are going to pick up our moving truck in just a little bit here. I'm exhausted already, even though we haven't moved anything into the truck and we haven't started driving yet, so I'm a little worried. I've just been carrying this knitting project around with me just because it helps when I feel like the stress is getting a little high. It's nice to have something to work on with my hands and fiddle around with a little bit. This is probably going to be my last update to you all before I see you next, which is probably going to be in the moving truck and driving. We'll see. Maybe I can finish knitting this piece before we get to the other coast. I wonder what state we'll be in when I finish knitting this sweater. I feel like it'll be before we hit Nebraska. Let's see if that prediction is correct. I'll check in with you all a little bit later. We just hit the road. I'm super excited to get going. We just entered New York State. It took us a while to get on the highway, but now we're on. We have about 12 hours of driving ahead of us, so it's looking like we're probably going to arrive just after midnight today. I think I'm just going to pull out my knitting, put on probably an audiobook, and just enjoy the ride for a while until it's my turn to drive. It is past midnight now. We made it to our hotel. We're somewhere in Ohio. I can't wait to get to bed. I'm so sleepy, but I just wanted to update you on the progress on my sweater. This piece, we are done with the increases. Now I just have to keep on knitting until it's as long as I want it to be for under the arms. I have to double check. I think the pattern says a little over 12 inches, but like I said again, I have a long torso, so I typically like to make it just a little bit longer to make sure it fits me comfortably. But I think I'm gonna think about that in the morning. For now, I'm gonna go hop in the shower and then get a good night's rest, and I will see you again in the morning when I'm a little bit more coherent, hopefully, and awake. Good morning. I'm feeling so much better today. I got such a good night's rest. I'm ready for a long day of driving. We are still in Ohio, but we're making our way to Nebraska today. I originally thought I could finish this sweater before we hit Nebraska, but now I'm not so sure. We'll have to see. We left off last night. I haven't done anything so far. I have about 10 inches knit on this, and I want to get to 14 inches before I shade for the underarms. The pattern calls for 12 and a half, but I think I'm gonna go for 14 and see if I like that length better for this sweater. Some more knitting and a lot more driving. We are now somewhere in Iowa, I think. I just finished up a chunk of driving time, so I drove for a few hours, and now I think I'm going to switch back to being a passenger so I can get back to some knitting. You might have noticed I was starting to work with colors, and I think I am now on my third pattern row of the colors out of 23. So yeah, there's no way I'm finishing this sweater before Nebraska. But maybe I can finish the pattern section between today and tomorrow. I don't think I can knit without seeing, but I can't do color work without seeing. So once it gets dark, once the sun sets, I won't be able to continue working on the color sections. Let me refuel myself and the car. Good morning. We have another full day of driving ahead of us, but this is a really exciting day. We are starting in Nebraska, we'll drive through Wyoming and end up in Utah to pick up Nutella before we head on to California, and I'm so excited. I think we're both so excited to see her again. We got, I think, like 10 or 11 hours of driving ahead of us, and I am gonna grab more of my knitting and keep going. I am about a quarter of the way through the color work. And yeah, I didn't get any knitting done when the sun went down. Even before the sun went down, you need a lot of concentration for the flat color work, and I was making mistakes, so we'll see. I'm hoping to maybe get through it today. Let's get to knitting. Oh, maybe some coffee. I'm a little tired. We definitely made the most important stop of this move, and we picked up our most precious cargo, which is Nutella right here. And she's going to be joining us finally after so many months again on the last bit all the way to California. We have about 10 hours of driving left. I guess I will see you in the new place. Welcome back. It is a few days later and we made it to our new place in California. Little Miss Nutella is back and I'm so happy. The other thing is I cannot remember at all what I last updated you on in terms of knitting my daisy sweater. So let me just show you. I have been slowly working a little bit in the background on some stuff, so let me just show you where I'm at. On the drive, I was working on the front of the sweater is fully complete. I'm super happy with it. I have also finished the back of the sweater. This one, I think the color work turned out much better. I don't think I made any mistakes. I am on to working on the sleeves. This is the last bit for this sweater before I'm done. Here is one of the sleeves. I have gotten to the point on this sleeve right before the color work pattern starts. I basically am just repeating the color work pattern like I did for the front and the back to make the daisies show up. Let's finish this sweater first. I've just finished all 4 pieces that are needed to make this lovely Marguerite sweater, or daisy sweater as I've been calling it. I have the front and back as well as the 2 sleeves. At this point in the instructions it says to press and then sew it together. I don't usually press my pieces before I sew them together, but because this is flat color work, and I'm definitely seeing that, especially because I think this is like the linen, there's some irregularities in the tension, so I think pressing it before I sew it together will really help. Then I'm going to sew everything together with the sleeves needing to be pleated into place. Take in that excess and hopefully add a little bit of volume up at the sleeve head, and then the majority of the sweater should be done outside of choosing buttons. And buttons have become some of my favorite ways to add a little extra personality. Let's go check out my vintage button collection to see what we can use for this particular sweater. Now that the sweater is fully sewn up and I've added the crochet to the collar, we are on to the last bit of finishing, which is finding the buttons. I have 3 buttons that go up to close the back neckline. You might remember from a while back now, I got this huge lot of buttons from an estate sale, and I have so many beautiful options that I'm going to go through and pick out. They're, I think, mostly vintage buttons with some newer ones and some potentially antique ones. As a bit of an aside, I have so many buttons here that there's no way that I could make enough things that require this many buttons, so I've decided to list some of them for sale on my Etsy shop, which is linked down below. So if you're interested in some vintage buttons that are maybe a little bit unique from what you might have seen before, feel free to check that out and I would be happy to mail them to you. And it would be super cool to see what you eventually use them on if you do decide to get some of them. Thinking about this particular sweater, I'm gonna go through a few options and then let's see which one I think fits best. My personal favorite button is this beautiful flower button. I think it would work so well with this sweater, but I unfortunately only have one. I also have this other, I think it's Calla Lily button, which I did like, but I thought the size was slightly off for making sure that the whole sweater would be securely closed. So I ended up settling on this particular button, which I still think worked out really well. And I am so excited to show you the final result of both of these sweaters. Recently, I decided to start a knitting journal, so now that I have finished these 2 lovely 1940s jumpers, I thought it was time to finish up their entries in this new journal of mine. I like to include the start date, the end date when I finished knitting something, the pattern that I used, a picture of the pattern itself, as well as a sample of the yarn that I used to knit up the project, so I can go back and look over all of the projects that I've done, even if I don't still own those projects, because I do knit some things that are meant fully only as gifts. So I think it'd be nice to keep a record of what I did and what I knit when. Thank you again so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please feel free to give it a like. If you enjoy seeing anything like this, like historical, vintage knitting, fiber crafts, fiber arts, please feel free to subscribe, and I will see you all again very, very soon. Bye!